Hey folks, I'm just doing a voice check. Can you hear me? Thank you for posting the stream, folks. Do we want to give another couple minutes for folks to arrive, or should we get started? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. This presentation is actually to talk about the LGBTQ History Museum that's located here in Second Life. The main museum is actually located on the mainland, and we have a small exhibit here at the fairgrounds for the celebration this week. And I will be speaking about the main museum primarily in a series of slides right now. And then we're actually going to take a little bit of a walking tour over to the museum exhibit here and do a little walkthrough and discussion around that. I'm happy to take questions at any time. If you have questions, I'd recommend that you just type them in the chat. I will do my best to try to keep an eye on that, and we'll certainly answer your questions. We'll also have some time at the end for a Q&A session. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. So just a little bit about who I am, because I don't know many of the people here today, but I've been a resident of Second Life since 2006. If you look at my profile, it'll say 2007 because this particular avatar was created in 2007, but I did join in the huge growth phase of Second Life back in 2006. I have a number of what I call educational spaces here in Second Life. The one we'll be talking about today is the LGBTQ History Museum and Cultural Center. And thank you, Rebella, for the comment about driving in the lag. That was quite fun yesterday with the Pride Parade. Um, The LGBTQ History Museum has actually been in Second Life since the end of 2006. It was originally set up in November of 2006 and has lived a few different lives over the years and been present at some of the birthday celebrations over the years and some of the Pride events as well. I have a few other museums. We won't be talking about those much today, but I do want to mention them for anyone that might be interested. There is the Museum of Computing History. That actually started up in September of 2022 during some of my return to Second Life and spending a lot more time in Second Life during the pandemic and such. We added about a year later Brevin Cat Island. It's in the Brevin region, and it's actually a build that is to educate us about our feline friends, about their health, their behaviors. There's also a memorial park on Brevin Cat Island where folks can submit pictures of pets we've lost and missed, and that we just want to memorialize. So that one's there for anyone that wants to visit. All of these are open to the public and people are free to visit. The last, and this was a recent, was the Museum of Telecommunications, which we just opened in March of 2024. I'll talk a little bit more, in the presentation about who some of the other folks are involved in the museum. While I am sort of the curator and make a lot of the decisions about the museum, it is a group effort. There are other folks that help keep me honest with quality levels and quality assurance and with some of the builds where I have aspirations that exceed my building capabilities. So it's helpful to have some assistance, like everything else in Second Life. So that's me, and it's nice to meet all of you. And thank you for taking the time to join us and for spending a little bit of time with us today. So I want to talk a little bit about the museum exhibit that we have here at the fairgrounds. It's going to be here for the duration of the Summer in Bellisseria event. So it's been here since the event opened on Thursday this week, I believe, and it will be here through the close of the event. For anyone that collects the BBB stamps in their passports, we do have a special edition BBB stamp for the museum exhibit here. It's located at the exhibit. We'll be walking over there in a little bit, and I'll point that out when we go past it. So for anyone that likes to collect those, it's here. Um, and I want to mention that the exhibits that we have here are really just a subset of what we have at the main museum. The main museum is much larger, has over 100 or so different displays with different information. Here at the this particular exhibit showing that we have, there's only really a couple of dozen of those. So there are many more. If you find the topic interesting and want to learn more, we can provide a slurl or a LM to the museum. So continuing on, I just want to talk a little bit about the exhibits we have here. We do have some general information about LGBT history here, some timelines, as well as some information about all the pride flags. As many of you may know, there are quite a few pride flags. I know I can't keep track of them all anymore, and so we do have a couple of exhibits about that. We have an exhibit about LGBT activism and individuals and groups involved. We do have some information about HIV, a health concern that has affected the LGBT community for many years. We also have an influential people exhibit where we highlight folks from, various walks of life, be there, activists, actors, politicians, etc., who have been involved and influenced the LGBTQ movements over the years. One thing I'll mention, a lot of ideas for some of these exhibits or people to add to the influential people, for instance, come from other SL residents. So once in a while, I'll get an IM from somebody that says, "Hey, one of my heroes is not here," and I typically will then go and do the research and add them to the museum. That just happened actually here during this event In fact, somebody gave me some information yesterday about somebody that I wasn't aware of, that helped a lot in the LGBT community during the HIV pandemic. So, um, if you have any ideas, you can always feel free to IM me, drop me a note card, whatever. I'm always all ears. Okay, I want to talk about the main museum a bit. Though we won't be touring the main museum today, I do want to mention that we do have a full field trip tour scheduled during the Bellisseria summer event. I believe it's on Tuesday of this week. It is on the calendar, and I'll check before we end the session today just to let everybody know. But that walking tour where we're actually going to take a field trip over to the main museum will be one day this week. Um, but I want to talk a little bit about the history of the main museum. So, as I mentioned before, it was originally created in November 2006. And there's a picture of it there. At the top picture on the slide behind me, um, it shows the museum as it existed in November 2006 in all of its, 2006 prim glory. Um, and blocky textures and all of the best Second Life had to offer in 2006. Um, Below that is actually a picture of the museum today. It's obviously had some evolution over the years, and we have added a lot more exhibits. We've tried to make more use of mesh and better textures over time, and just continually try to add more information to it. I'll also mention, we do exhibits at some of the Second Pride. We were at some of the ones over the years. In addition, we do exhibits at quite a few of the SLB celebrations. We have an exhibit currently over at SL21B, in fact, along with our other museums. So currently, the main museum is located in the Dalton region, which, if anybody remembers the old Linden Village, where the Lindens used to have offices, and they were there from some of the early days of Second Life through, I would say, about 2010 or so, and then they started to use them a lot less. But we are located just across the water from the Linden Village. In fact, directly across from a plot owned by Philip Linden, in fact, as well as the Linden Temple, if anyone remembers. The Linden Temple, which is in the Kirkby region right next door, is directly across the water from us as well. Um, and we have a few mini exhibits in other places. The Pride at Home region, which is run by Coral Lacey and team. We have a small exhibit there on both the some LGBT history as well as the HIV exhibit, and the Cave Lounge and Lanes, which is a build over in Cheche, which is over in Satori. We have a build there thanks to Timothy McGregor, one of the folks involved in helping with the museum, his generous donation of some space for a mini exhibit. So we're all over the place. Okay. I've had some folks ask me, why create an LGBTQ museum in a place like Second Life? Of course, my first answer is, well, why not? But besides that, there are a number of factors that I think make it a worthwhile thing to have in Second Life. And one of the reasons, of course, is that access to information about LGBT life, about LGBT culture, issues, health, etc. It's just not available in some places. I happen to live in the United States, where, depending on what part of the country you live in, LGBTQ life might be well represented and well respected, and just a part of daily life for many people. There are other parts, even of the United States, where it is not, as open or welcome. And I've met some folks in Second Life over the years who have said, "Thank you so much for having this museum. Um, we don't have anything like this in my country, and I'm scared to even go look at it on the web or things like that, where folks might be able to figure out, and I might have some consequences for that." So it is a valuable resource, and it allows people to explore this content, talk to other people, and experience this in a relatively safe setting. Second Life, is a place where people can come and be pseudo anonymous to some degree and be able to partake in this with a little more safety than they could in their real lives. And a lot of countries, block access to information about LGBTQ issues and such. And so Second Life, may not be blocked in many of those cases. So the ability to come in here and see that content, it can be liberating for many folks. I also get a lot of people that just, come up to me and, IM me and say, hey, thank you for putting this together. I saw some of my heroes here, or I looked at the HIV exhibit and remembered friends I've lost, or whatever. People just seem to connect with it on many levels, and it's not always just folks who are part of the LGBTQ community. I've had IMs from folks who are parents, that have lost people to HIV, or that have children that are part of the community, and they just think it was a great resource. Um, so again, a virtual museum allows us to present this sort of curated information in a way that's relatively anonymous for the folks who visit, and safe for them. The other thing is, Second Life is just an amazing platform for something like a virtual museum. The interactivity of it, the ability to do media on a prim with video or other content, the ability to have scripted objects that react to touch and things like that. It allows us to do things that we can't quite as easily do on the web, or in 2D platforms, for instance. So that's another reason for an LGBT. And then of course, as I said earlier, and I think Dreamer typed it in the chat as well. Why not? Second Life has everything else for the most part. Why not have this represented here? And so, for the last 18 years, almost, I guess 17 and a half now, roughly, we've been here. So I just want to talk about some of the exhibits we have over in the main museum. There's quite a few compared to what we have here at the fairgrounds. We just didn't have as much space here at the fairgrounds to put the whole museum. Plus, we'd like people to come see the full museum. So this is sort of a teaser to whet your appetite and hopefully get you intrigued about the topics, and hopefully consider visiting the full museum. We have a number of full-time exhibits, and I think I've talked about some of them already, but we have a lot of information about LGBT history and timelines. Now, I'm from the US, so some of it is US centric, but I do try to include EU and other places where I can, and where folks can help me with it. So if you see something that you think should be represented there, please let me know. Another big exhibit is the activism in organizations. There have been a lot of organizations over the years that have made a huge difference in the freedoms and the lives of LGBT people around the world, and we've tried to represent some of those. Again, HIV and AIDS is a fairly large exhibit, because it was certainly in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, a prominent, and continues to this day to be a prominent, factor in the lives of many LGBT folks. We have another topic, that's also pretty important, and somewhat politically charged at times, but it's LGBT marriage and relationships. We have a number of exhibits about the different forms of LGBTQ relationships, as well as LGBT marriage as it is allowed in some parts of the world. And then last, probably the largest exhibit is the influential people exhibit. I would say every 2 months, 3 months, I try to add a few more to this as people reach out to me, or as I think of things or discover things that can be added to this exhibit. We also have a number of transient exhibits. on things that sort of just move in and out, and some they're smaller exhibits, and they tend to be about very sort of niche topics or about locations where there are big LGBT communities. So currently there is one present about LGBT heroes of 9/11. There were many victims as well as first responders and heroes on that day about 23 years ago. And so we wanted to sort of have an exhibit to uh, highlight their lives, their presence on 9/11, etc. We have a couple of exhibits about locations here in the U.S. That are big LGBT sort of vacation and or living spots, like the Castro in San Francisco and Provincetown, which is located on Cape Cod in Massachusetts in the United States. And then occasionally we do other exhibits. We have an LGBT athletes exhibit, and we do have a few others as well that we cycle through time to time, with the goal of keeping it fresh, keeping people, coming back to the museum and seeing new content. Okay, just want to talk a little bit about the LGBT history exhibit. Um, this particular exhibit has a number of timelines and information about major moments in LGBTQ history worldwide. Um, and then some specific exhibits highlighting on places like the USA, Canada, London, and the UK. We also have an exhibit, as I mentioned before, there's a lot of pride flags these days, and keeping up with them and knowing what they all mean. I personally can't keep them all in my head, but we do have an exhibit on those, as well as an exhibit about the first rainbow flag created by Gilbert Baker. It's a really nice exhibit put together by Timothy McGregor. The LGBT activism exhibit, as I mentioned, we talk about activism organizations, both past and present. Um, there have been a lot of organizations and groups over the years that have made a huge difference in the acceptance of LGBT folks, for LGBT rights, getting, the HIV pandemic recognized as such, and getting the kind of response that was needed to try to find, cures or drugs or methods to manage it. Those groups were very important in the LGBT community. They are all highlighted in this exhibit. A very notable event, particularly here in the United States, was the riots that occurred at the Stonewall Inn in the 1960s. Actually, I believe it. I don't remember the exact date, but if somebody does, feel free to type it in the chat. I don't recall off the top of my head, but the Stonewall exhibits, I'm sorry, the Stonewall riots were effectively an event that occurred in the United States that really brought LGBT rights and equality issues to the forefront. The news picked up on this very heavily. I love seeing some of the old news articles, or news clips, etc. From this. This was sort of before my time, being part of the community, but it is a very important event. Tim created a very nice, the lower picture there shows the exhibit that we have, which I believe he included some pictures of um, different 1969. So thank you, Tim, for looking that one up. So again, I was not able to be part of that at that time, but it was a very important event. And in this exhibit, Tim has some newspaper clippings, photographs, etc., that commemorate the events that occurred. It occurred roughly over a week, right around this time of year, in fact, back in 1969. There's also a note card that you can click on a display and get a note card about the event. We actually have a copy of that here. We'll see that today here at the fairgrounds. The HIV and AIDS exhibit. This exhibit is a bit of a mixture of things. But first and foremost, we wanted to provide information around HIV, the HIV virus, around prevention of contracting the HIV virus, as well as information about AIDS, which is the disease that the HIV virus can cause, and treatments for it. Um, Anyone of a certain age will remember that the 1980s and 1990s, for the most part, AIDS was effectively a death sentence. Um, Folks that contracted the HIV virus, that then progressed into the disease called AIDS, acquired immune deficiency syndrome, um, typically passed away within about a year or so. It was almost a certain path to follow. In addition, we have a few exhibits actually on the memorial quilt. There's a was an AIDS memorial quilt. I believe if you were to try to display it in public today, it would be the size of multiple football fields. It is huge, and each quilt tile on the quilt was contributed by someone, a group, or an individual that lost someone to HIV and AIDS and wanted to memorialize them. Back in, I think it was 2009, there was a group that put together an AIDS quilt in Second Life, in fact, and we have an exhibit about that as well as a video, a little machinima that I created many years ago about the AIDS quilt in Second Life, and it's largely about information about residents that we have lost to HIV. There's also a few other bits of information about HIV activists as well as organizations and groups. One of the other things we have in this exhibit is an HIV molecule. It's actually a 3D, it's called a ball and stick diagram of effectively a drug called an HIV protease inhibitor that was the first class of drugs that came out in the late 1990s that changed the discussion around HIV. With protease inhibitors, HIV stopped being a virtually certain death sentence and became more of a sort of manageable disease with very good prognosis for long-term survival. That molecule, by the way, is here, and we'll talk a little bit about it when we do the walking tour. Um, be forewarned, I have a personal connection to the molecule, not as a patient, but as part of a research team. So I'll talk about that a bit when we do the walking tour. Okay, continuing on, we have the LGBT Heroes of 9/11 exhibit. Um, Again, this exhibit is just talking about different folks, some of whom were victims who were on the aircraft or in the buildings that perished on 9/11. It's also about some of the pilots. There were pilots and flight attendants on some of the flights who were part of the LGBT community, as well as some first responders. And so we try to commemorate those that we have found out about and have some images up there about them. So that exhibit's currently there. This is one of the transient exhibits that occasionally gets shuffled out and replaced with another one from time to time, but it will be there, at least a few months each year. Okay, as I mentioned before, the influential people exhibit is probably one of the largest exhibits. It has dozens of panels with information about different folks who were influential in the LGBT community over the years, either as activists or educators. There were a lot of folks who educated around the issues and rights issues around LGBT, allies and supporters. Some of them, for instance, actors and actresses who were allies and supporters to the community over the years, politicians, and as well as many artists, actors, musicians from the community that either had an influence on LGBT rights or quality of life over the years. And again, this is one I get a lot of folks saying, hey, I didn't see one of my heroes or somebody that always mattered to me up here. And I am always happy to add them. Okay, I think I'm back online. Can folks hear me now? Okay, great. Sorry about that. My headset, I'm using a wireless headset, and it decided to disconnect in the middle of while I was speaking because, well, that's what wireless devices like to do sometimes. Anyway, I think as I was saying, the influential people exhibit, this is where I often get folks recommending things that they don't see. In fact, I got an IM, I think it was from you, Dreamer, that somebody had mentioned to you someone they thought was missing from the exhibit. So I actually have already pulled information, and we'll probably be adding that person this afternoon. So I try to do those pretty quickly, or I batch them up and do them every few weeks. I love to constantly add to that section in particular. So it will be happening, Dreamer, if you would like to let them know. Continuing on. For some reason, this texture is not loading for me. Is it loading for others? Okay, let me try to go back. Let me see if I can go forward. Okay, it looks like this one isn't going to cooperate. Um, this was actually highlighting another exhibit. I don't know why that texture is not loading, but it's about the LGBT marriage exhibit. Um, and what this exhibit has is different information about different forms of sort of legal constructs for LGBT, including, from domestic partnerships up through marriage itself, and talking about the evolution of that. We have some maps about where it's available, where it's pending availability, etc. That's a moving target that I try to keep up with as much as I can. Okay, moving forward, just some general museum information. Um, so again, the main museum is located in Dalton, across from the Linden Village. I'm actually going to post the slurl to it here in the chat for anybody that cares to have it. Please don't click it now and go there because it will take you to the main museum, but I did want you to have it. So there in the chat, I just provided a link to it. And great, that'll be great, Jerry. I also want to point out there is a kiosk, an information kiosk in the exhibit here that we're going to. I'll point it out. If you click on it, it will give you a note card that will provide a link to the full museum, information about the museum, um, information to contact us if you want to suggest any new content, etc. I also will mention, as the URL indicates there, the museum is listed in the Second Life destination guide. So we are listed under the LGBTQ plus section, and I believe also the education section under museums. As I said earlier, museums, this doesn't happen with just me. While I do sort of act as the effective curator for the museum, I build many of the content and the information and sort of plan out the exhibits and such. It doesn't happen without the help of other folks. And that includes folks like Kevin Cerulean, who he's here. I think he's sitting in the back somewhere. Who is my partner here in Second Life, as well as also my real life spouse. And Kevin does quality assurance. As I like to tell people, it's a perfect role to have your spouse doing because they basically get to point out everything you do wrong. And anybody who's married or in a serious relationship knows that is certainly a good job for a partner. So. And Timothy McGregor. Timothy is also here today, sitting in one of the seats. Timothy is somebody I met in Second Life, I think, in 2006, and have kept in touch with over the years. Though we've never met in person yet, we do need to fix that someday. But Timothy does help a lot with building exhibits. As I mentioned, he built the Stonewall exhibit, for instance. He also helped with the build of the lands and the grounds around the museum and things like that, and always participates in a number of objects. If you look, you'll see he was the creator of them. So again, it takes a village, so we're the three core, but I could probably list 50 names of residents who provided great ideas for content as well, and so we're always all ears about that. Okay, so we're going to now stop here. And we're going to go do a tour of the fairgrounds exhibit, which is just a few steps away from us here. So I'm going to um, take these slides away for now because I know that Rebella is planning to do a party here after our presentation, so I wanted to start cleaning it up for her. But if everyone could stand and follow me, we're just going to take a short walk over to the oh, it's fine, Rebella. I'll take it out of there. But we can take a short walk over to the museum. We're just going to do a walking tour of some of the exhibits where you can actually see some of the things I'm talking about, which is a little more interesting than hearing me just talk about them. And also, just as we get over there, I'll send out an SL URL for those who don't feel like walking if you want to teleport over. Okay, we'll give everyone a chance to get over here. Okay, we're going to go ahead in. So this is the fairgrounds exhibit that we put together. The goal here was to give you just a little bit of a feel for some of the exhibits at the museum. And we'll just sort of take a walk through. I'm happy to answer any questions along the way. First thing I'll just point out is out here in front, just to the left of the main entrance, is a wonderful sign actually that Timothy McGregor built that sits outside of the main museum and just is sort of a teaser sign highlighting some of the exhibits and some of the content from the museum. We also have a small cafe here that's actually representative. We have a cafe at the full museum where I sometimes just see folks sitting around sipping coffee and chatting. So that is we wanted to have that here as well in case anybody wanted to use it. Here inside the main door, there is the kiosk that I mentioned. If you click the kiosk, you can get a note card with information about the museum. It'll be on your right as you come through the front door. And just to your left as you come through the front door is our museum bear. Keeping with the tradition of Second Life, we, of course, have to have a teddy bear. And so the museum teddy bear is there. If you actually click the bear, it will give you a copy of it. So feel free, anyone who collects bears, to collect the bear at this point, or if you'd like to click the kiosk, and you can select the note card or LM, it'll give you information on how to get to the full museum. Okay, moving through. Why don't we go through the perimeter first? Here on this side, right in front of me, is the LGBT history exhibit. And again, we have some of the content from the main museum here, and it's been shrunk down just to sort of fit in this space. But it shows some of the information we have about timelines and such from LGBT history. I'm trying to represent more areas of the world with this, and I do hope to add more content in the future, but right now we do have some US, some general moments that are worldwide, as well as information from Canada and the United Kingdom as well. But if folks have other information they can provide me, I'm always happy to add it. In addition to this exhibit, we have some of the flag exhibit that I told you about. One showing all the different pride flags that I honestly just can't keep track of anymore, as well as Tim's wonderful little exhibit here about the rainbow flag and how it came into existence and became a symbol of LGBT freedom and rights. So this is a nice little exhibit. There's some text there um, on that as well. Over here we have some of the HIV and AIDS exhibit information and the HIV and AIDS disease. We also have a video display here. If you have media turned on, it will take you to a YouTube video of a machinima I created. I think it was back in 2009 that shows the Second Life version of the AIDS quilt that was presented at Second Pride in 2009. So a little while ago. I don't believe the person that created the quilt in Second Life is still active in Second Life, so unfortunately, it hasn't grown or continued since then. But it was still a pretty decent accomplishment back in the day that it was created. Just to the right of me here is the BBB stamp kiosk. So if anybody collects BBB stamps in their passports, this is a special edition stamp that will only be here for the Summer in Bellisseria 2024 celebration. Um, Hopefully we'll be here in the future as well to do more. But if you do want to get that stamp, feel free to go ahead and stamp your passport. I mentioned I did want to talk about this HIV protease inhibitor molecule. So the molecule right in front of me is called a ball and stick diagram, and the different colors on the different atoms represent um, different atoms within the molecules. So um, some of them represent carbon, some represent hydrogen, oxygen, other elements. Um, I actually have a personal connection to this particular molecule here. I actually imported the information for this molecule, and Timothy actually helped me turn it into a mesh because the prim version of this is rather heavy on the LI. Um, and This particular molecule was one of the first HIV protease inhibitors that came out in the late 1990s. And I had the privilege of working with the team that conducted the research and we used computer modeling and a lot of other tools to actually create this molecule, and it came to market in 1999. Um, and it goes the brand name for it is Lexiva, but it was one of the first HIV drugs, and it changed the world. Not just this one, but a whole class of them came out at that time because it could reduce HIV infections below detectable levels in folks when used in combination, particularly with other drugs. And it really changed the dialogue around HIV and AIDS from one of, just palliative care and giving somebody the best quality of life for what they have left, which is usually a relatively short period of time, into something about this drug can let you lead a fairly normal life. It's not going to, you will still have some sickness or particularly from the drug, as well as, some of the side effects of the drugs, but it's no longer a death sentence. And this really sort of changed the world. Again, I was fortunate to be part of the team. I'm a computer scientist, so I provided computer support and assisted with developing and implementing some of the tools for modeling and energy minimization and other things around this tool. But I do have a personal connection to this. Of course, the real credit for this goes to the scientists who really, synthesized this in the labs and who worked on this drug and studied it and designed it, in fact. But I still was, happy to be, doing a small part in it. So this has a special connection to me personally. Okay, continuing on. I have a number of panels through the rest of the perimeter here, uh, labeled the Influential People exhibit. Again, this is really just a smattering of the exhibits that we have at the full museum. So, if you have a favorite figure from history, etc., that you feel is not represented here, they may be at the full museum. Um, and if they're not, give me a holler because I'll be adding one today. In fact, based on feedback from somebody here at the fairgrounds. So please let me know if you don't see anybody. But I've tried to have a decent cross section at least here. The first three on my left or directly in front of me now are related to HIV and AIDS, either activists or having been affected. Um, I wanted that next to the HIV/AIDS. The rest of the folks here, go all the way back to Michelangelo, Sappho, Alan Turing, who was actually a famous computer scientist. Tragic story behind Alan. He was, in fact, also featured in our Computer History Museum because Alan and his team were able to decipher the Enigma codes that were used during World War II and allowed the Allied groups, and so the U.S., the U.K., EU, etc., Japan, etc., to basically read the private messages of their opponent and change the course of the war dramatically. I don't believe he worked with Oppenheimer, Deb. He primarily worked out of Bletchley Park in the UK. That's where they did a lot of the work on breaking the Enigma code and built some computers called bombs, BOMBE, that could actually decipher the code. And so it definitely is, worth learning a bit about him. Tragically, he commits suicide. And the reason he commit suicide was because the UK government found out that he was gay and effectively, which was a crime in England at the time, and they sentenced him to chemical castration, and he commits suicide, in fact. So I, definitely want to suggest you learn about Alan Turing. He, by the way, has been posthumously pardoned, and the UK government apologized. I think it was about 10 years ago for doing that, particularly after the fact that he saved millions of lives. And then we have a smattering of other folks along here. Indeed, Rebella, kind of too late, but nonetheless, the gesture matters, I think. A number of other folks here just throughout history. And I tried to include folks from around the world. So we do have Oscar Wilde, who's from the UK, Peter Tatchell, and a few others. Again, this is a subset of what's at the full museum. But if you do see anybody, let me know, because I always like to add content. Okay, moving to the middle here, we have a bit of the LGBT activism exhibit. So there are some quad displays here on the floor with different organizations. Some of them going back quite far to the 1900s, well into the middle of the 1900s through more modern organizations. And here at the back of this exhibit is a slightly scaled down version of Tim's Stonewall exhibit, where you can read about Stonewall, see some news articles, photos, etc. Oh, I just noticed one of the textures on the pictures are off somehow. That they shifted. I'll fix that in a minute. But these are the exhibits we have here. And again, these are a subset of what's at the full museum. If this content is of interest to you, I invite you to visit the museum, or even if you're not sure what this is about, if you take a few minutes, visit the museum, you may learn a few things. So that's the end of my presentation. I wanted to have about 10 minutes or so for questions or comments or anything anyone wanted to make. You can feel free to, ask at this point now in either chat or through a note card if you'd like. I'm sorry, note card, chat, or voice, whatever you prefer. Does anyone have any questions for me? Oh, thank you, Dreamer, for sending out a notice with the note card. We should do these often. So I will put up. We actually do tours of the full museum once in a while. They typically get announced in the education groups. I tend to do one about every couple of months or so. So if there's if folks want to participate, I do those. In addition, if you want a tour at some point, either for a group or whatever, just IM me. I'm happy to do a walkthrough and talk about the exhibits at the museum. And thank you, Radioactive, for the kind words. And I'm not kidding when I say if folks have any suggestions for content to add or a hero or something you feel that is not represented, give me a holler. I'm happy to add it. Um, if there are any questions, I'll answer them. Otherwise, feel free to take a walk around, look at things. If that prompts any questions, oh, sorry, Deb, do I have a subset exhibit of literary people? I don't, Deb. Do you have any? And I'm sorry, I missed your question. Do you have any suggestions around that? So Oscar Wilde actually is there. He's in fact, if you look right under the sign that says influential people exhibit, he is the third one on the right. Um, but if there's others, Deb, that you have, I would love the feedback. I could even make it either a section of the influential people exhibit, or if there's enough, I could create it as one of the perhaps even one of the transient exhibits. What I'd ask Deb is if you do have a list, if you could throw them in a note card or something, I would be incredibly appreciative. And if it ends up being something I can do a mini exhibit for, I would certainly give you credit for it as well. But I'll be here. So if anyone has any questions, I'm gonna hang out here for the next 10 minutes or so. Otherwise, I'll stop talking your ears off and let you just have a look around. By the way, one question I often get, you know, how can folks contribute to the museum? The only thing I ask is if you have information you want to add, let me know. We actually do not accept tips or donations at the museum. We want the museum to remain free. If folks feel they want to give a tip or a donation, we ask that they do it to some organization that is meaningful to them. But as a museum, we don't accept any tips or donations or anything like that. But I'll stop talking. If anyone has questions, feel free to ask. Air hugs are always accepted. I'd also say air hugs, high fives, always appreciated, but also criticism. If there's anything that we didn't get right, please let us know, or anything we should add.